Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Ted Heinig with AC Entertainment, Vice President of Concerts. Welcome to Promoter 101, the greatest podcast in all the land.
Do you or a loved one suffer from crippling boredom? Sick of your family and friends? Wish you could get away and listen to the world's #1 5-star rated AAA++ music business podcast? Well, have I got a solution for you. You need Promoter 101, the world's #1 5-star rated AAA++ podcast, guaranteed to put a smile on your face. BBB accredited Promoter 101 has received 16 JD Power Awards over the last 20 years, always providing the highest quality customer service at the low price of free $99. That's right, free $99. But wait, there's more. If you buy now, you'll receive a super secret special guest host for this week's episode. Also, absolutely free. You can't afford to miss this once-in-a-lifetime offer. Call now at promoter101.net. That's promoter101.net. It's Promoter 101.
This is W. Luke Brooks, and it's episode 94 of the Promoter 101 podcast.
Wait a minute. That doesn't sound like Luke. Dave Brooks, is that you pretending to be Luke Pierce?
I've always wanted to have a single letter as a first name. So yes, it's me, Dave Brooks, Amplify, Billboard, and all your news needs.
Well, hey, Luke is overseas in Europe, and it would be awesome if you would play the part of Luke this week, if that's okay with you.
Big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best, Steiny.
Not so much big shoes as much as boat shoes and a variation of different colored pants, usually a floral color or very vibrant red.
The guy definitely has a thing for pastels and nice colors for sure. Did you see that picture of him, by the way, with O.J. Simpson? I was like, whoa.
You know, Luke has a brand, and I'm not sure that doesn't fit Luke's brand. He'll be on the podcast next week after golfing in Ireland, and I'm sure there's a story behind that, and I'm going to let him tell it because I can't wait to hear it. But this week, Promoter 101 is brand new. We've got the legendary Alex Hodges holding court from Nederlander Concerts as our main interview, Dave.
Also, AC Entertainment's Ted Heinig gives us a play-by-play of making it to the World Series of Poker, and he talks about, how we fared.
That's going to be exciting. And AEG presents Senior Counsel. Jason Bernstein shares some free legal advice, things everyone should know for any entrepreneur in the music industry. So stay tuned for that.
And also, why I am usually here, the news of the week.
This is Bob Rue with Live Nation, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Do you want us to visit you? We'll come, record the podcast, whether you work at a lumberyard, you're a college student, or hey, a lowly concert promoter or an agency. Talking to you, William Morris Nashville, with that big stage in the center of your office. Talking to you. Anyway, we're willing to come anywhere because we need friends. So invite us and drop us an email at steiny@promoter101.net and say, hey, you can hang out with us. Please come, and we'll do that.
I've seen that amazing amphitheater in the middle of their office. I want one of those. I wonder how they work with a performance space in the middle of the building.
I think it's when they bought Wimbledon, they thought maybe at some point they might have an exhibition in their lobby. So when they moved offices in Nashville for like the third time in 10 years, they're like, what we don't have is a place for McEnroe to do an exhibition. So I'm thinking that's what's coming next. But it is the coolest thing. If you haven't been to William Morris Nashville, I don't think you need an invitation. You just go over anytime and just kind of hang out on that stage because the thing is fucking cool.
Yeah, they have a little kitchen there. Pour yourself some kombucha, grab some cheesy snacks, and think about how you want to see Dan and Luke live in person when they come to your town.
Well, hey, me and Luke aren't appearing anywhere right now that has been announced. I guess our agents aren't doing their job. But, stay tuned. I'm sure we'll be back on the road before you know it. Or maybe we're washed up and any people are just afraid to tell us. Dave?
If you want to tell these two crazy guys something, all you have to do is reach out by email, steiny@promoter101.net.
You can also follow us on Twitter. Luke is W. Luke Pierce. I am, of course, at The Jew. The show is Promoters 101. That's plural. Or if you want to go without the plural, it's just Promoter 101. And you can catch Dave at The Real Dave Brooks. Don't be fooled by any of the fake Dave Brooks. He's the real deal, the original Billboard amplified only Dave Brooks at The Real Dave Brooks.
I hate to interrupt you. It's just real Dave Brooks.
It's not it's just
real. Yeah.
Well, there it is. Heard it from the horse's mouth.
Hey everyone, this is Cindy Leinott,
Kira Finkenberg,
Patty Ann Tarleton,
Whitney Bond,
Amy Miller, Dawn Holliday,
Marcy Allen,
Paula Palazzo,
Becca Leifer,
and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
If you've missed any of our past podcasts, well, fuck you, man. Way not to support us. No, seriously, you can always catch up. And this week we're featuring our classic reissue. It's episode 51.
This episode features road legendary turned technology mogul, SRO consultants, Mike McGinley, a.k.a. The Goon.
Also, Paradigm Talent, Jason Kupperman, a.k.a. Cup, talks about his view of the industry.
And a war story coming at you from Argus Event Staffing, Michael Fruitman, a Colorado security icon.
And don't forget, you can drop us a review or subscribe or, you know what, or don't. You know, whatever.
No, I think you really want them to, Sonny. It's okay. You know, people, they listen to this podcast all the time. The least they can do is drop you a review or hit the follow button. I mean, come on. Subscribe for Christ's sakes.
Hey, this is Greg Wolf from IVM on Promoter 101.
News of the week.
It's time for News of the Week, and we're so lucky to have with us this week Dave Brooks from Amplify Billboard magazines. Dave, what's going on in the world of entertainment?
Well, Steiny, right literally as we're reporting this podcast, we have breaking news. It just broke right in front of me, on the ground, in a pile, busted.
Well, can you put it back together for us and tell us what the fuck happened?
I'm going to try. I just got word that the lawyer overseeing the lawsuit between AEG and Ozzy Osbourne in the venue wars has rejected AEG's motion to dismiss the case. Ozzy and AEG were going to trial.
AEG has never been afraid of court, from what it seems. I mean, they'd spent a lot of time there in the Michael Jackson case, and they never fared away from the threat of big, huge payouts. They seem to know how to work their way around the courtroom.
Phil Anschutz does not settle lawsuits, I've been told, and I don't think this is over for these guys. Will it actually go to trial? God, I hope so. What is the probability? I don't know. It's tricky, you know. Does Ozzy want to fund an expensive lawsuit that, you know, he's got a 50-50 chance of winning? I don't know.
You know, obviously it's Sharon that you've picked on when Ozzy's suing you. And is that somebody you want to be on the other side of the table with when it comes to court? And I kind of get the idea after seeing Polestar that maybe the Ofu Group guys and the Polestar guys and the Live Nation guys might also line up behind her on this. Thoughts?
You know, it's tricky when you're in the news business and you're clearly aligned with one side of a rivalry. I don't know how you navigate these potential conflicts. Should be really interesting to see how they react to this.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, Dave, because you're in the news business, right?
Yeah.
Where is the line between being friends with a concert promoter when you're reporting on the business as we are friends? But where's the line between hard news and friendship? How do you balance that?
Look, I mean, it's okay to be friends with people, I think. You know, I mean, we're all friends, right? I think it's different when you have a financial interest that goes beyond just like advertising for each other and promotion. I mean, when you're kind of clearly making money together and you're also covering the person from what's supposed to be an unbiased editorial position, it's tricky, you know? I'm not going to say like that they're doing it wrong because I don't really know what they're doing, but these are ethical issues that go back, you know, forever.
Okay, so for us to have a beer together is just good relations, and it's important for you to have good relations with everyone in the industry if you're going to report on them. But if you were a financial investor in Emporium, it would definitely mutter the waters of what you'd be willing to report.
Yeah, either, you know, I mean, there would be three things I would do. Either I would, A, just constantly disclose that to you. B, I would, you know, maybe give you favorable coverage. Or I think C, what we're seeing is they just don't touch certain stories that might be uncomfortable.
Okay, so like you buying and investing in Emporium is probably not going to happen then.
Well, Dan, I asked you for those P&Ls last week, and you just sent me a crayon picture of a dinosaur. So the due diligence process is not going well.
Those are our private books. I don't think that was meant to get to you.
We never signed the NDA.
Those are our books, man. Anyway, What else is going on in the news, Dave?
Panorama Festival in New York City had a pretty rough weekend. The first day was canceled because of severe weather. There was all these kind of sound issues happening, and Lil Wayne and Greta Van Fleet both canceled at the last minute. Lil Wayne had travel problems, and Greta Van Fleet's drummer had a very broken and hurting finger. This event has been plagued with all sorts of problems. I mean, keep in mind, it was never supposed to be on Randall's Island. It was supposed to be in Queens and Flushing Meadows. There was this huge political fight over it. It got moved to Randall's Island after 6 weeks after a governor's ball took place. They don't really want to be there. And I really don't know if this event's coming back to New York next year. Just like I don't know if Meadows Fest is coming back to New York this year.
Well, I mean, if you think about the team that's involved with that, you're talking about Paul Tillett and Golden Voice behind that. And now you've got the Bowery guys there to support it. And Mike Lubin, the Madison House guys. I mean, AEG New York is fucking stacked. They should be able to produce the best events in the world, as they do at Coachella and Royal Seiko. They are amazing at this. So sometimes it takes a couple of years to get their feet under them. Obviously, sound issues happen. They're live events. And the weather, as great as Paul Tillett is as a promoter, he can't control the fucking weather.
Well, hey, I agree. They have the A team working on this. I think they probably put on a great event. Maybe just New York City is not a festival market.
Ooh, challenge has been thrown down and the gauntlet is laid. New York. How are you going to come back at Dave Brooks for that? Let's see in years to come. It may be a minute before we have the answer to this, but I don't think this is over.
I think you're right. This story is unfolding. It's going to happen before our eyes.
But let me just say, Governor's Ball proves that New York is a festival market.
Because they have been successful?
Yes, it's a fucking great festival. And it is always producing. It has for years, and people love it. I don't think New York is not a festival market. I just think it's competitive, and it's hard to break a new brand, particularly in a market where there's so much multimedia going on, and it's so hard to get things in front of people. And it's such an expensive, competitive market. But I got faith in the guys at AEG to figure this out.
Governor's Ball is a great event. Jordan Wolowitz, Founders Entertainment, Live Nation, is my dude. And he's also a podcast listener, he told me. So, Jordan, what's up, man?
What else is going on in the news, Dave?
So this is probably one of the more dumb stories I've covered. It's totally driven by Wall Street speculation. So last week, while everybody else was, doing the summer thing, myself and all the other reporters were caught up in the hype that there might be a Sirius XM acquisition of Live Nation. Keep in mind, Sirius is owned by Liberty. Liberty Media owns 70% of Sirius, 30% of Live Nation. The thought was Rapinoe is killing it right now. The stock price is high. Maybe Sirius can buy Live Nation. He can run the company. They can buy iHeartMedia out of bankruptcy and swim in the dough like Scrooge McDuck. The only problem with this, the whole thing is bullshit. This was basically a thought experiment by media and tech analyst Brandon Ross of BTIG. He basically wrote an essay saying that he thinks this should happen, and the world went nuts about it. Sirius XM CEO addressed it on his earnings call, saying it's not happening. Live Nation didn't really address it, but it's not happening.
Okay, well, obviously there's some overlap with Malone's money in both companies. I love the genius of the idea that Live Nation got spun off by Clear Channel. Clear Channel became iHeart, and then Live Nation did so well on their own under Michael Rapino that they would come back and take over the parent company that spun them out as if they were getting rid of something bad. The genius of how that would have played out would have been just so ironically, lovely. But then again, would you really want to own iHeart right now?
Yeah, that's a great point, because I just don't think Rapino is really that interested in trying to save iHeart. I think he's just more interested in running his business, and Live Nation still has a lot of growth ahead. I think he's looking at a globe to grow this company. He's not looking at going through multiple years of $1 billion bankruptcy and then dealing with all these shenanigans at WTH what the fuck in Texarkana.
I think when you're talking about Michael Rapino, he's certainly got visions of expanding his global empire, and now we've seen that their film department is become a studio, and they're starting to really grow that. They've got some big stuff with Gaga coming up, and As a Star Is Born is coming, and I think we're going to see some really nice movement on this. But yeah, I think you're right. Live Nation is not done in acquisition mode by any means, and in growth mode. They continue to gobble things up, and they're doing a bang-up job with the growth.
They're doing amazing things over there.
Is there anything else in our little world of entertainment that's worth talking about?
Yeah, Dan, this is my favorite story of the week. MSG has switched from Coke to Pepsi. That's right, folks. The soft drink wars we grew up in are not dead. They're alive. And Pepsi just fired a shot across Coke's bow, ending a 100-year run for Coke in Midtown Manhattan.
It's actually a massive brand for the soda icon to lose. So that would seem like a big deal. Now, is that all of the MSG properties? Are we talking the Forum, the Beacon, Radio City, the theater? Is that all of those properties? The Wang in Boston, Chicago Theater?
Yes, it's everything. All the venues, both the hockey and the basketball team and the women's basketball team, even the iHeartRadio Music Festival. Everything is going Pepsi. This is a MSG-wide deal. I'm sure Pepsi paid a nice coin for this agreement to be the exclusive non-alcoholic beverage and snack provider across all of MSG. And like all of my favorite business stories of any consequence, the financial details of this agreement was not disclosed. Bam!
Are you a Coke guy or are you a Pepsi guy?
I am a Coke guy. I didn't even think there was still a thing that people were Pepsi people. What about you?
Now, my preference is usually Dr. Pepper if it's available, but I am standing here wearing a Coca-Cola t-shirt written in Hebrew as I report this. It's my favorite t-shirt in the world, and I grew up in a Coca-Cola household.
Yeah, exactly. I grew up in a Coca-Cola household too, and I'm a little disappointed when I hear the server tell me we only have Pepsi.
I'm fine with it, although I'll take Diet Pepsi over Diet Coke, but usually Coke over Pepsi. But I don't know that the world of rock and roll really cares what our soft drink choices are, but clearly MSG has made theirs, and they're with Pepsi. Dave Brooks, reporting on all that is happening in the world of music. Thank you so much for taking time and being with us on Promoter 101.
You got it, Steiny.
This is John Giddings, and I'm on Promoter 101.
It's everyone's favorite time, the announcement of the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week.
This week, we have an exciting announcement because the Promoter 101 Badass of the Week is going out to APA's Craig Newman. This one is because he's inspiring to us. Not only is he one of the most funny, outgoing, creative, and generous people in the industry, homeboy just lost 35 pounds. When you go to hug him, you can feel that it's gone, man. It's inspiring to see like how much he's working his ass off to thin his ass out, and he looks great, making him this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Congrats, Craig. Keep going on that weight loss. You're killing it.
Good job, Craigie Fresh.
This is Brian Hill from CAA in Nashville, and against my mother's wishes, I'm in Dan Steinberg's hotel room doing the Promoter 101 podcast.
In this week's feature interview, we've got the legendary Nederlander Concerts Alex Hodges holding court.
Alex Hodges in the house. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Welcomed you to your own office, but you know what the hell? Why not, right?
We're hanging out in Hollywood at the Pantages Theater in the offices of the Pantages. Just glad to be here, and it's not Burbank.
I've had the opportunity to interview you at Aspen Live a handful of years ago. I've known you for a very long time, and have had the opportunity to say that not only do I know you, but I feel that you've been a mentor to me. So I feel like I have an interesting perspective of your career as I've gotten to examine it from all points of view.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to do some of these interviews with you. Frequently, you throw me a curveball, but I hope I hit them.
Let's do the greatest hits. You've got some of the best stories in one of the most legendary careers ever. Let's have some fun today. Let's talk about your favorite things. You started in the early days at one of the bigger management...
Well, let me interrupt you first, and then you go right back to it.
Go for it.
I'm not sure anything in our business is really as fun as people think it is. Go ahead.
All right. Well, now that you've taken all the air out of the balloon... Your career start is one of the cooler things that I've ever seen. You worked with some of the coolest acts before anybody knew they were cool. The likes of Otis Redding. Can you give us some of that time period and background on how that all worked?
Trying to make the point to interns, to staff, and to others that this is a business, it's work. Indeed, it is an absolute amount of pleasure and fun in the right way. But when people think it's a party, it's not a party. We're involved in some aspect of careers of people. And for me in my life, to have been in college and to meet Otis Redding before he ever recorded at Stax Records, and then to be a part of booking him before I graduated from college, and then after I got out of the service too. He was a friend. We were the same age. And, you know, if you ever saw Otis Redding perform, before he ever had a hit, you would know you were seeing somebody great, something absolutely great. And he was a prince of a guy.
Clearly, I never had that opportunity to see Otis perform, but the icons that you've been involved with, and I think one of the cooler things in your career is you've had the opportunity to mess around with the label side, the management side, the agency side, and the promoter side. You know what the whole thing is all the way around. You've had success on all sides of the ball in this industry.
Well, I think what Phil Walden and I did, his label was Capricorn Records. He was also a manager of the Allman Brothers Band, and I ran an agency, Paragon Agency. And even before that, when we were in school, we were signing bands. In the heyday of the R&B world, we represented not only Otis, but Arthur Conley and Sam and Dave and others. And then one of Phil's dreams was to start a record label, which he did. I left the business maybe 6 months after Otis died. And I moved back to my home area of Decatur in Atlanta, Georgia, from Macon. And Phil and I would have lunch on Saturdays occasionally as he was trying to keep the business going and figure out what his next step was. And he came to Atlanta one day and said, I've got in a white label, which is no photos on the album cover, right? He said, I want you to listen to this album. It's not released yet. And if you like it, I'm going to ask you if you'd come back to Macon and start the agency up again. Ultimately, I did that, and we renamed the agency that we had before to Paragon Agency.
And who was the act on the album that was the white label?
The Allman Brothers Band.
I think they might have a chance of a career.
You know what? I would say to anybody, don't make a career decision off of one album. But when I heard this album and the mix of rock and roll and jazz and country and classical, all of these combinations of R&B weaved into a tapestry that made sense, as opposed to it not making sense. It was an unbelievable, musicianship and collaboration of sound, the instrumentals and the vocals, and it just knocked me out. And I indeed decided to go back to Macon and get back in the business in 1970 off of that one experience.
Now, in that time period, because of Walton, was Macon like Austin, where it was like a hotbed of music? It seemed like there was a lot coming out of there right then.
Well, in the mid and late 60s, it really was. And Otis he found Arthur Conley. Otis and Phil attracted so many artists, and Otis was probably the real magnet. And he didn't want to move to L.A. or move to New York. He liked being at home and having bought a big ranch, 400 acres, and had horses, and he had a home. And my brother helped design the renovation and expansion of his home. My brother was an architect. And so it was a family thing. And all of a sudden, when I got out of the service, Phil had signed Percy Sledge, who had When a Man Loves a Woman, and he'd signed Sam and Dave. They weren't recording in Macon, but they were being managed and handled and booked out of Macon. And so we just expanded on all of that. In the absence of, after Otis died, music was changing, everything was changing, and Macon was not the hotbed that it had been, nor the hotbed yet that we know of it and think of it today. Phil then got some funding and built Capricorn Record Studio, made a deal with Atlantic for a sub-label of a record label, and started putting some product out.
Can we jump over to the Paragon Agency?
Paragon Agency was what we formed an old Walden Artist Promotions Agency from the 60s to Paragon Agency in 1970.
Who were some of the acts that Paragon repped?
Well, we're still representing Clarence Carter, who had several number one singles, Candy Staton, Arthur Conley, Percy Sledge, but we were expanding into rock and roll and blues. And Phil signed Alex Taylor, James Taylor's brother, and I represented Alex Taylor, put him on the road. I guess my first non-R&B type artist was John Hammond, the son of the famous A&R person for Columbia. John is a well-known, today still working blues guitar player, playing clubs and playing concerts. And I put him on front of the Allman Brothers later in a stadium date or an arena date. And we signed Muddy Waters to go in front of the Allmans.
We signed Muddy Waters to go on in front of the Allmans.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, I represented, it's not like I represented Muddy for a long number of years in his career, but I was really thrilled to represent the Muddy Waters for several years. It was just pretty awesome, really. But some of the artists that we had came to Macon in search of an opportunity to record. Wet Willie from Alabama, the Marshall Tucker Band from South Carolina. And they came in with their demos or whatever and said, can we get signed? And in the Marshall Tucker Band's case, Phil signed them to Capricorn.
Were they good in the early days?
They were amazing. Listen, when you don't have Toy Caldwell and you don't have Tommy Caldwell, his brother, things change. So they were the catalyst and the inspiration of the band. And God bless everybody in the band because they had a great collaboration with Doug to sing and so forth. It was just amazing. But when you got the Marshall Tucker Band in its original configuration, it was another of the great classic country rock guitar bands. Just amazing. Totally amazing. And I went to Phil. They were not sure after the first recordings or demos what to do. And people were coming to Phil and Frank Fenner at the label and offering to start their own label and buy some of the contracts out, which, by the way, I was going to say earlier, what we were doing was really the first 360, that everybody talks about. But anyway, on the Marshall Tucker Band's case, they were considering selling the contract. And I went to Phil Walden and Frank Fenner at Capricorn, and I said, what you see is going to be classic song, going to give them a career. A&R Radio will pick up on it. What you see she's doing to me, it's just an amazing song. It's going to be kind of one of those anthem songs on the live stage. And we kept them, and then you succeeded with multiple platinum albums. Somebody just sent me a plaque yesterday that probably hung in my office in 1977, but somehow it got mixed into some things that were auctioned at the Capricorn when they went south. And just yesterday, I get a plaque that Marshall Tucker Band in 1977 was the highest grossing act at Merriweather Post Pavilion. So to get this, 40 years later or something, it was just pretty cool.
Send it to Hurwitz to put it backstage, and I bet that's pretty awesome.
What? I could do that.
I bet he would do. I bet he'd display that proudly. That's awesome. So let's jump ahead to Paragon for a second.
And interestingly, the promoter, I was the agent for Marshall Tucker Band, had the biggest gross at Merriweather Post that year, 1977, and the promoter was Nederlander.
Really?
I don't even know what to think of that. Here I am working with Nederlander.
There's some irony in that right there. Well, Nederlander has certainly been doing it for a long time, pre and post. But let's talk about the agency for a second. Some of the biggest agents in the business cut their teeth at Paragon.
Well, Buck Williams was out with Alex Taylor and said one day, I'd like to get out off the road and teach me how to be an agent. So I put him to a desk and a phone.
Seemed like that worked out for him in the REM days and Widespread Panic.
Great. And then Terry Rhodes had wanted a job. He was promoting some small concerts around the South. He came to me and said, I want to work with you at the agency in the early 70s. And I hired him, and he's now in New York with his own agency, but years with ICM. John Huey was in school and was on a committee, and they'd bought some bands and did a good job. So I met John Huey at a conference, told him, meet me after I spoke, meet me at the bar or something. And you can't miss John because he's very big. I wanted to hire him as my bodyguard, but in any case, he joined the company. I said, what are you doing when you graduate? When can you come to work? He said, well, I want to take the summer and travel and come to work in the fall. And I said, well, why don't you travel over a period of about 10 days and then come to work? And he said yes. And so he's at CAA in Nashville. And Carol Counsel came from Philadelphia to Macon and was working with the record label and the management firm. I think 79, she helped me at the agency, and then I started a new agency in 1980, trimming down, starting a new company, no partners, and I needed a colleague. I needed somebody with a lot of talent, and I thought that maybe Carol could do this. She had not been an agent in book shows, and she said, I don't want to do that, and I can't do that. And that's like selling on the telephone to sell your band. I'd rather be on the management side, production side, and I love the music. I said, okay, so I'll take that as a yes. she and I worked out of my house for like the first 6 months, my wife making lunch, and we had the Allman Brothers Band, the Charlie Daniels Band selling out arenas, Atlanta Rhythm Section with hit records, and I think one other act at the time. And then we started growing Empire Agency, which was a post-Paragon agency. Who else was at Paragon Agency? One Ian Copeland. And that's a great story of how I recruited Ian to move from London, England to Macon, Georgia. Not to L.A., not to New York, but to Macon, Georgia.
Single-handedly, you changed the economics of the bar community in London and Macon with this one move.
Backstage Cafe.
Legendary drinker, Ian. Great hang. Epic hang.
Rum and Coke.
Good guy. Miss him.
Listen, Ian was, got that personality and that amazing magnetic smile and way. So Ian was in London and wanted to come to the States. And who tipped me off that he would like to be an agent in the States was his brother Miles.
IRS
This
Records.
was before hearing any demo of the Police. This was just like, I represented at the time Climax Blues Band, which Miles was managing. But with all of my other roster, and I'd gone out to sign more than Capricorn Records, by the way, that's really important to the Paragon story. I went out and got Leonard Skinner, who was handled by Alan Walden as management, and they were on MCA. I went out and got Charlie Daniels, which ended up, he was at Epic Records, and I went and signed Atlanta Rhythm Section on Polygram. And I knew that I wanted to diversify my circle of friends, allies, colleagues, record company contacts to be really in business in a sense as an independent agent with various A&R guys and record company guys to really focus on some of these young careers. And what was interesting in my life was signing bands before their first record came out and believing in them and then having the success that we had. I signed Leonard Skinner to the agency before the album came out. It was cut. I got to hear it. And I went to Atlanta to see him in a club and then ultimately worked with them too. So for several years. In any case, post-Paragon Agency, I started Empire, but I was actually talking about Ian for a minute. I want to go back to Ian Copeland because Ian came to the States and interviewed with all the big agencies. So when I met him actually in Los Angeles and hung out an evening with him, I said, I want you to come to Macon. I want you to see the office. I want you to meet the people. I want you to hang out, go to a club, and you'll see some great musicians who are just walking in and jamming with other guys, right, other band members. But I'm really interested in you coming to Macon. And let me ask you, when you talk to the other agencies in New York, what are they going to let you do? What do they want you to do? He says, they'll let me sit at a desk under an agent for a while, and then they'll let me book Utah or Montana for a year or two. And I said, when are they going to let you sign a band? He said, maybe in 4 years. Kind of the way they are putting it to me. I said, you're coming from London. You're seeing things that I don't see. You're hearing new sounds that I don't hear or see. So I want you to come work for me and sign me some bands that I have no idea what they are, what they're doing, and the music is unfamiliar. You're going to come to Macon, Georgia. You're going to be introduced to the likes of Larry Maggot, Ron Delson, and Bill Graham. You're going to book anything that I tell you can book, and it won't be the Allman Brothers, and it won't be Leonard Skinner, and it won't be Marshall Tucker Band. We're going to develop something new, and that's what you're going to do from day one.
It's fucking cool as shit. And you got him.
I got him. And I encouraged him to start his own agency a few years later. I had 2 young children. I wasn't thinking that I wanted to move to New York. So I moved back to Atlanta with Carol Counsel, Kathy Fain, my assistant, and my wife and 2 children, and we took off. And Carol's husband at the time was a really good engineer and producer. Her career just flourished from the very first day she picked up the phone to make an outgoing call to be as an agent for these artists.
She cut you any slack when you buying shows from CAA from her these days?
Well, we do. We did Tori Amos 3 nights at the theater at the Ace Hotel last fall. It was really amazing. And so we worked work with Carol as often as possible. With the touring equation today, the strength of Live Nation in buying tours, it's hard to wedge in and sometimes pull off a single date or find your carve-out shows. But just as a little postscript to the people who worked with me in the agency, Don Muller was an assistant at ICM when I was at ICM. Zelma Redding, Otis Redding's widow, in Macon one day back in the 70s, came to me and said, I want you to teach me to be an agent. And she became a vice president of Paragon Agency. She did that for a few years very successfully, but she had other enterprises she wanted to do, and she started some other companies in retail business and so forth. She was just a dynamic person herself.
You managed what most people would consider the best guitarist of all times. Going from the agency world, you wound up in bed with Stevie Ray Vaughan. How did that happen?
Well, I'll tell you that Stevie Ray Vaughan association with me and the developing friendship started as an agent. I'm going to say it was 1983, and I got a call from somebody I had met years ago who was working with the Grateful Dead at the time, Chesley Milliken. And I was representing the Allman Brothers. And we were at a college conference, and neither one of us put up a big display. I think both of us just put up a T-shirt at a college conference. And at the college conference, you had to put what's your price of your band. So this was like maybe 1971. And I just wrote down, it was an unheard of price at the time. I wrote down that the Allman Brothers are $40,000 a night. He wrote down the Grateful Dead at $40,000 a night. We were the two highest priced bands listed in the entire conference.
I would buy that show too. Together, 80 grand.
So
I'll buy the tour.
Chesley Milliken, an Englishman working in San Francisco with the Grateful Dead, and I became very close friends. As time goes on, you don't see people for a long time. And I probably hadn't seen, in 83, I probably hadn't seen Chesley for close to a decade. And the phone rings, and Chesley Milliken's on the phone, and he said, I want you to come see Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's a trio, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, actually a four-piece band, including Stevie, called Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. And he said, I'm going to make a record deal. Guy doesn't have a record deal, but I'm going to get a record deal, either with the Stones label or A&M or Epic, or I'm going to get a record deal for him, and you're going to really like this guy. Coincidentally, I had heard from Ray Benson of Asleep at the Wheel of a young Stevie Ray Vaughan. So it was at least by familiar a name. But I didn't have time to go to Austin, but I did have time to send somebody. So I sent a young man named Rick Alter, who Carol and I had hired in Marietta, Georgia at Empire Agency. 1983, Rick Alter goes, meet Stevie Ray Vaughan and my friend Chesley, and comes back like wide-eyed, and you're going to love this. You got to do it. You have no choice, Alex, but to sign Stevie Ray Vaughan. And Chesley had put a requirement on that Stevie had been working clubs, so he was probably getting $450 one night and $650 another, maybe $1,200 once. But the average was probably well under $1,000 a show. That's the life he was living at the time. He didn't have an album, so he was just known as a great blues club act, right? Chesley said, I don't want a single show under $1,000. That's a tall order, actually, at the circumstances. No album, not a great deal of great history.
Word of mouth, the product.
And I said, okay, you got it. Let's do that. But I only said that after I saw Stevie play. Put him on the Electric Ballroom, I think, probably Alex Cooley or Rich Floyd's club in Atlanta at the time, across the street from the Fox Theater in Atlanta. And I went down early because I wanted to say hello to Chesley and meet the guys. So when they landed in the Atlanta airport and came to the gig, I was already there sitting outside in a little patio. And I met Stevie and Chesley right when they walked in, and Chris and Tommy and Reese. And Stevie and I just had eye contact that was like some kind of bond was happening already. And Chesley was my friend. He opened to the Greg Allman Band. Every musician, every person, including myself, were just completely wide-eyed and mesmerized. And when the musicians come to you and say, this is unbelievable, then you know it's not just, your imagination or your desire for it to be really unbelievable. It was just, Stevie was totally, absolutely unbelievable. And everybody knew it. So I took on the challenge. He still didn't have a record label. He still didn't have an album. He didn't have a single. Didn't have anything other than Chesley himself, the band.
Had you been managing other acts at that time, or was this new for you?
I had managed maybe one other, maybe a band from Alabama, something that never really happened. I was managing an ex-member of Atlanta Rhythm Section with his band, and they had some good songs. They should have had a deal. And I was managing Greg Allman's solo career at the time.
That's actually a pretty decent roster.
But Empire Agency.
And were you working as an agent simultaneously?
I had a partner working with management, and I was trying to resurrect Greg's career by listening to songs and trying to find some song that could get him a record deal, because nobody wanted to sign a Greg Allman. So now I have Charlie Daniels' band was doing, big shows, Atlanta Rhythm Section, theaters, 2 arenas. The Allmans were on hiatus, so I call it that, but they had broken up one of the many times that they'd broken up. They couldn't get along. Greg Allman's solo, Dickie Betts' solo band, Carol was booking too. We represented Delbert McClinton, taking on Stevie Ray Vaughan.
So you're working a full day.
It was pretty amazing. We were having fun. But we also knew that there was, since Ian had gone to New York, I didn't have that element of the English import and new wave and
mod stuff,
funk bands and so forth. So I hired a young guy who was signing to some more contemporary attractions. But Stevie I fell in love with. I think one of the bands that we had was a West Coast band called the Circle Jerks at the time when we were in when we were in Marietta, Georgia.
Keith Morrison.
By the way, we call Marietta, Georgia part of Greater Atlanta, which is Hotlanta, not just Atlanta. And Marietta spelled is Merritt. Anyway, we were just doing great, hopeful that Chesley would get this deal for Stevie. And ultimately, very quickly, he landed and signed the deal with Epic Records. How Stevie got that first album done was a signing by John Hammond. And Jackson Browne was greatly responsible for letting Stevie use his studio. So the collaboration of people, and at the same time, David Bowie let him, asked him to record on his album at the time, and he was going to go on the road with Bowie and then maybe work dates with his band on the side. That's very, very hard to do. Ultimately, anyway, Stevie had a label, started taking off. And in 1984, I got a phone call from ICM suggesting that maybe I'd be interested in a job on the West Coast to head the music department. So I flew to New York and had meetings. And then the president of ICM, Jeffrey Berg, flew to Marietta, Georgia, or Atlanta, Georgia, got a car and drove out to my home to meet me and my wife and kids, and said, you got to come work for us in Los Angeles. I said, you're going to have to move me, because I had a full contingent of, I had a household full and a 41 Ford pickup truck as well. So anyway, I moved to Macon, 1984. Crazy.
You ran the biggest promotion firm in the world. When you were at House of Blues, MCA, House of Blues, that whole world, you guys were the biggest promoter in the world. You guys conglomerated, had clubs, were buying people, had the amphitheaters. Long before Clear Channel got in the game, you guys were it. And you were running that company on the concert division side. You were it.
Well, my boss was Jay Marciano, but I had left Nederlander. And to get to the point of House of Blues and MCA concerts, you have to first recognize while I was managing, had been the agent for Stevie Ray Vaughan. I became his manager in 86. Jimmy Nederlander offered me a gig, come over and run his booking department. He was the biggest in a way for the summer, at least, because he had a whole slew of amphitheaters across the country. Pine Knob was in Detroit, and Poplar Creek in Chicago at the time, and Cincinnati, and Meriwether Post Pavilion, and others, and Pacific Amphitheater in Orange County, and the contract on the Greek Theater. He said, run your management company, have your clients, and run my concert business too. Fast forward a few years, after some amazing triumphs that we had, including 2 nights of Pink Floyd at Yankee Stadium and 60 to 70 to 80 shows a year at the Greek Theater, I made a move to MCA concerts. This would be about end of 94. And we had already done with Nederlander, done Barbra Streisand at the Pond and so forth, 6 nights. Just some cool stuff. But I was ready for a new challenge.
So Pink Floyd to Barbra Streisand. man. You're booking everything at this moment.
We were.
You're crushing it.
And during that time with Nederlander, that first go-around with Nederlander, I had the good fortune to promote Frank Sinatra at the Greek Theater too, and meet Frank and his manager, Elliot Weissman. And Elliot Weissman's son now handles Joe Bonamassa. So, we're all in a circle, and we meet each other coming and going, and competitors one day and allies the next, and so forth. My first full year over at MCA would have been 95. And fast forward a couple of years, there was the roll-up where SFX was created, and they were buying out Nederlander amphitheaters, buying out Ron Delsner, buying out Alex Cooley, buying out Pace, in all their amphitheaters, and they made an offer for the Universal MCA amphitheaters and concert division. And we didn't sell to MCA. We didn't sell to SFX at the time. But Edgar Brofman had come on the scene at Universal and wanted to unload the concert company. As huge as we were, new amphitheater in San Diego, a new amphitheater in Toronto, and all the string of amphitheaters from Cleveland, Dallas, Atlanta, etc., and the Gorge in Washington State near Seattle, Fiddler's Green in Denver. It was just what we were doing was totally amazing, and in Canada was totally amazing, promoting every level, arenas and clubs, but we didn't sell to SFX. Universal didn't sell our company to SFX or Clear Channel. And ultimately, we were talking about acquiring House of Blues. And instead, House of Blues...
When you said you were talking about acquiring it, with MCA Concerts?
Yes.
Okay.
MCA, we were having some preliminary meetings about acquiring House of Blues, and turn around, House of Blues financial investors and venture capitalists and banks decided, well, maybe we turn the table and buy MCA Universal Concerts. So the club company with a wonderful brand, the House of Blues, ultimately bought MCA Concerts. So we all were merged in under the umbrella of House of Blues as a branded company. The original idea was to go public, which didn't happen.
The idea of a promoter being public just seems nuts, and I don't think anybody actually thought it was ever going to happen. And clearly, the biggest promoter in the world now is a public company. And I don't think it would be the world's completely most shocking thing if AEG eventually wound up selling to a company that was public or wound up becoming a public company and somehow. I imagine at some point those guys will change their format. But you guys are probably, with the Broadway and the sporting side, probably the third biggest promoter in North America when you put all your assets together. As far as actual tickets sold, when you look at the Yankees and the Broadway division and your concert division, you guys are moving a ton of tickets as Nederlander.
When you consider the history of the Nederlander family, going back over 100 years to James Sr.'s father, and now Jimmy Jr., James L. Nederlander, his father. It's a family-owned company, obviously very successful in multiple levels and types of businesses in terms of property and real estate and Broadway theater and producing Broadway shows and in the concert world. And when I first joined them, they were very strong in concerts, as I mentioned, but they sold their amphitheaters into what became Clear Channel and became Live Nation. But they didn't leave the concert business.
Well, they still own a good number of the Broadway houses around America.
So when you consider 9 Broadway theaters in New York, 4 in Chicago, contracts at Durham Performing Arts Center to program and manage that fantastic Performing Arts Center, 3 in London, the Pantages here, it's just unbelievable the success that Jimmy Nederlander and the family and Nederlander organization have. Now, we are considered ourselves, at one time, I guess you would say, we were as big as you could be in the national concert world. Now, we would like to say we're the best boutique.
When you say boutique, I imagine you running a floral shop. Like, it doesn't really fit.
We're not public. We're not huge.
But you got pockets that are big. You
mentioned Live Nation. You mentioned AEG and their size, which puts us into the concert promoters, independent concert promoters in the States. Certainly, we're in the top 5. And it's pretty much fun. I mean, I say it's not fun because I emphasize this is real work. This is real career. And when I see an NBA team on the court, I know basketball is a lot of fun. Those guys, it's a business. They're working, and they're working real hard to try to win a trophy. We are trying to grow. and continue doing the great job that we do. And I think several things that make us unique. We're based in LA. We have the Nederlander history. We have what I can bring to the table. We have a great young staff and team of concert promoters, ticketing people, marketing folks. In particular, I'll mention Jamie Loeb and Vanessa Chroma. And we've got as good a team as anybody could ever have and put on any court in the concert business.
Well, sticking with your basketball metaphor, you've got a bench like no other. There's no question. But let's talk about this fact that you have Yankees money in your pocket. You guys could be a global touring competitor with Live Nation and AEG if you wanted to be. You could be making this 7-figure offers.
When you think about the Nederlander properties in Broadway and Hamilton playing in Chicago and New York and San Diego with us and coming back to the Pantages at a point and so many other things, properties, amazing shows, that we are definitely well-funded and could probably back any tour that we wanted to. What I'm not wanting to do today is to be David and the Goliath. I think what we're trying to do today is figure out a sustainable and repeatable business that we can do 12 months a year, every year, and grow upon it. And when you consider the success that we've had in some small venues, it's a very achievable new story, and putting together multiple cities and then going into the arena business when somebody is not selling their whole tour on a global or North American tour basis and taking on more arena dates from that point of view. We could back or finance and produce any level of shows. Now, once you try to say we're going to do 20 cities at once or 40 cities at once, that's a lot of logistics. But I have the advantage that some of my staff have done national tours before. A lot of my staff have done national tours, so we're familiar with different venues. As a matter of fact, while I'm talking about our focus on smaller, more repeatable business with a larger menu of artists to fill those seats, we're working with 45 different venues today. And nobody recognizes that Nederlander is doing that. They think of us as having the Greek Theater for 40 years and still promoting some at the Greek Theater, but we don't have the key to the Greek Theater. And so people say, what are you guys doing? Well, we're doing, 300 concert shows, another 170, 190 to 200 special events where we're not at risk, but we're buying shows and we're doing special events at the Grove and other places, benefit concerts and helping people produce those. When you put it all together, and then the other Nederlander assets of concerts in other cities from New York, we're doing 500, 600 shows a year. Out of my office here, we're doing over 350, 400 events, whether you add it all up. Concerts are advertised, so you can see those ads and the link to buy tickets with Ticketmaster or Access, and you can see the advertisement in the market. But when you put together everything that we're doing out of my office, we are indeed selling a lot of tickets in a lot of cities, at a lot of venues, and that's our new story. We're mobile, we're flexible, and we're growing on that basis.
Amen. Hallelujah. Independence in the house. So Nederlander's a competitor. There's no question about that. Nobody's ever going to worry about you guys paying the acts or if your production's good or your marketing's good. You guys are a solid player in the market. Is there a concept for expansion, or is it we're doing what we do in our comfort zone?
Status quo has never made me very happy. So we're going to grow. We are growing. An example is last year, in the last half of the year, we did our first concert at a soccer field in Sacramento. We've signed a contract for an exclusive at Papa Murphy's Park, which is at Cal Expo. Bill Graham used to have it as a stage in the amphitheater at Cal Expo. We just did the Slayer Lamb of God concert on Mother's Day, 2018, May 13, a huge gross for Slayer and their package, and they're now on a national tour, and we will do the last show that they do on this tour in San Jose at SAP Arena. So we're growing and we're active and we look at opportunities, and each opportunity whether we're doing Gloria Trevi and Alejandro Guzman in Austin at Frank Irwin Center, or at Papa Murphy's Park in Sacramento, or at Vina Robles Amphitheater in Paso Robles, we are looking at diversity, at growth, at different levels of capacity, and getting on an airplane and being there and opening the doors and having the best concerts in the United States of America. And we're now operating in 45 different venues, 20-some, 30 different cities. And yes, some of them are a greater priority because we're doing 30 or 40 or 50 shows, and others we've just started working and we're doing 2 or 3 or 4. Worcester, Mass, we'll probably do 20 shows this year. 3 years ago, we didn't, only I knew where Worcester, Mass was.
Alex, before I let you go, best show you've ever seen?
Best show I've ever seen?
Yeah. What was it?
You can't say one. You can't say one. Before I had a driver's license, I saw Elvis Presley. I managed and saw many Stevie Ray Vaughan shows. And I saw Otis Redding on many shows, including his homecoming show in Macon, Georgia. And my sister-in-law saw an Otis Redding show, and Sam and Dave were in front of him, and she said, how do you follow that? Otis hit the stage, and she said, it's as if nothing else came before him. So when you think of the Police, and you think of Barbra Streisand, or you think of when I represented John Denver, you think of Leonard Skinner, Allman Brothers, Stevie Ray. I can't name one best show. It's not possible to name one single best shows. For me, though, it's gratifying that I can look at somebody on stage, and if it's not the most played album or the most played song at home, I look at them and I go, you know what? They're the best in what they do. John Denver is different from the Allman Brothers Band. The best, though. So you've just got to look at these shows and go, unbelievable. You know, I've seen the Stones, and they're unbelievable. But I always have a little bit of extra sympathy if we promoted the show, a little extra affection for the show that we produced, or if I represented the act.
A little bias there. That's fair.
Absolutely. No question about it. There's got to be some.
We could talk for hours. There's no question. Just scratching the surface. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me on Promoter 101 today.
You're welcome, and I hope everybody enjoys it, and I'll be listening to your other shows on Promoter 101.
Alex is an icon. So amazing to have him here. Just an honor to just get to rap with him. What's one of those moments that I'm going to get to tell my kids about later. And hey, they'll get to listen.
This is Aaron Rosen from Kill the 8. Stay tuned for Promoter 101.
Tweets of the week.
Guys, it just cannot be avoided. It's time for the tweets of the week. First one, when a publicist reaches out for the first time the Monday of the show week, Promoter 10 WTF.
It stands for what the fuck?
Oh, I thought it stood for waiting to fart.
You know, and that's the thing with acronyms. They could be open to interpretation. Anyway, way to get ahead of the game, publicist dude. Hitting us on Monday. I guess you're thinking that we don't have print deadlines anymore because nobody reads print. So, hey, we can get you an hour before the show. And maybe somebody cool will tweet about it. Come on, guys.
Get it together, Mr. or Mrs. Publicist. When a house manager takes hours to work out settlement on a house nut, hashtag you can't make this shit up.
It's a house nut for a reason. What's there to think about? Come on, guys.
The nut. It's a house. This is simple shit.
Not for everybody, apparently, Dave.
I've never settled a show in my life, so I really have no idea what I'm talking about. But regardless, when a venue fails to mention they have rebranded their venue's name.
It's amazing when every time you get this email after, like, you've sent the offer, you've built the hold, you've confirmed the date, you see the first admit, and they're like, oh, guys, our name has changed. It's like, maybe you would have wanted to have mentioned that at some point.
Well, that's a tricky one because wouldn't you be afraid of confusing people? You know, I don't know about this one, Steiny.
Well, usually you go with the new name and then you do formerly known as. You help with the branding because by contract, you kind of have to. Brand recognition is important, but if you were the Staples Center, formerly the StubHub Dome or whatever, you got to tie it together. But one way or another, it confuses people when suddenly you change the name after you've announced the show. So you just want to get the branding set and go with it. It's really short-sighted when you don't at all mention at some point of the booking process, we have a new name, guys.
There's a building in Davenport, Iowa that was recently called the iWireless Center, which itself is a terrible name, but now it's the Tax Slayer Arena.
Well, I will tell you, Dave, anytime somebody cuts you a check, it makes it not such a terrible name. And I think that's what the venue manager was thinking. Money makes everything okay in this industry, as it always has.
I can't argue with that, Steiny. When you are told Saturday afternoon a tour is announcing this Wednesday, hashtag promoter10WTF.
Thanks for fucking up everybody's weekend. Like, seriously, you couldn't have mentioned that we got on sales going up? Box office people, marketing people, venue managers, everyone pissed. Thanks.
When a venue sells out of beer during the opening act, hashtag so much for the per heads.
It's the bread and butter of the industry. Don't run out of beer. Come on. This is 101 here. Seriously.
Yeah, how do you run out of beer?
Well, there are some people that are dumber than others. And I'm going to go ahead and award that dumbass of the week to the guy that runs out of beer during the opening act. Like you didn't know you're going to have 4,000 people in your venue all wanting a beer or 7. Drives me goddamn nuts.
I think we got one more for you. When a marquee says not sold out.
This is the all-time best.
Were they doing this ironically?
Actually, it's something Ice Cube did. He made a movie that he wrote called Janky Promoter with Mike Epps. And it's from his experience on the road dealing with some of the most sketchy promoters ever. And he put in every little trick, you know, how to try and fuck the venue out of payment, how to get around getting the band the hotel rooms you're supposed to at the 5-star and giving them the 2-star, how to get out of giving them the limo. And the venue that they were working at, like when you showed up, instead of sold out show, it had not sold out, which I just thought was the best thing I'd ever seen. But I believe all of these little wisdoms came from things that he had seen over the years and put them all together, which I just thought was amazing. Janky Promoter, check it out. It's amazing. I believe it's on Netflix right now, but it's worth a watch. If you're in the industry at all, regardless if you're a hip hop fan or not, it's just, the movie is funny.
Yeah, I just found it here, 2009. I never heard of that. I'm going to check this out.
I've seen it a couple times, and I got to say, it makes me smile.
Well, that does it for Promoter 101 tweets. You can follow Dan at The Jew on Twitter.
I'm Jeff White with Ticketfly, and we're on Promoter 101.
Next, we are joined by AC Entertainment's Ted Heinig, who gives us a play-by-play of making it to the World Series of Poker and talks about how he did.
I'm with the legend, Ted Heinig, AC Entertainment.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
So we could talk about rock and roll, and we'll get to that shit later. But everybody's been cheering you on for the last couple of weeks when it comes to the World Series of Poker. You were at the biggest show in the land in Las Vegas, and you fared pretty well.
Yeah,
dude.
It was awesome. Just came out of a meeting for some potential sponsorship and naming rights on that. Just trying to work every angle, Dan.
The Ted Heinig Open.
That's right. Team Ted goes international.
This wasn't your first time. This is your third?
This was my 4th time to play the main event.
Just to sit at that table is $10,000.
Correct.
Okay, but you didn't have to pop for that. You won your entry, right?
That's right. I played, it's called a satellite tournament. There was a smaller tournament that I was able to win for $500. So for the $500 entry, when you win it, you get your $10,000 buy-in, plus you get all your travel expenses paid. So it was pretty great.
Okay, so ballparking 12.5 is basically
what
you won. Yeah,
12.5.
Okay, so and you came in first place to get that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so how many people did you beat?
It was like 600 and something. There were like 30 people that won it. So maybe there were 660 total entries, and the top 30 people all got the seat in the travel.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you call it your one time. Like I got my one time, so it felt really good.
You win your entrance, and you're heading to Vegas. And anyone that's never been in the room in Rio while this is going on, whether you're playing or not, I urge you to walk through. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
I couldn't visualize, because you see it on TV and they're focused on like 6 tables. You have no idea how massive the playing floor is. It's a full convention center with like 6 massive rooms with thousands of tables and just hundreds upon hundreds of players. And they have 3 days of day 1 because there's so many entries. And then you win your way into day 2 if you're lucky enough. And they're 2 day 2s, right?
There's 2 day 2s.
Right. And then you get to day 3, and then it's just 1 day 3.
Everybody's
right?
combined by day 3. I think the highlight was when you and your wife walked in. I was playing like day 1C, and suddenly Steiny is in the room taking pictures, waving at me.
I was excited. It was awesome.
Yeah, I had the best World Series they have ever had, and I give you and your wife all the credit.
Oh, man. It was so much fun. I was like, we know him. We know him. It's so awesome. It's amazing because you see the people with their hoods on, their hoodies on, and their earplugs on, and their sunglasses, and doing the full covering their mouth so you can't see any tells. And then you got the other guys that don't give a shit, that are just playing cards. But there's no music. It's just people upon people upon people playing with chips. But it's so deafening with thousands of people rolling chips through their hands every second.
It's a unique experience.
Yeah, it's not like being in a poker room in Vegas because it's just so much more massive. And just the sheer volume of the chips being played with is like nothing you'd hear anywhere else in the world.
In the day you came when I was playing the first day, I think it's the largest day for the main event they've ever had. So it was like 45 or 4,700 people played day 1C this year. A really good chance to hear the chips. It's like total silence. And then just thousands of people playing with poker chips. It's like a symphony.
It's just a little ridiculous, but in the coolest way, right? Because like you're thinking about rounders the entire time, like all the Matt Damon monologue going through your head.
Yeah.
You just see all these guys in the zone, and it's skies. It's a sausage fest for sure, like wall to wall dudes.
90. I think this year was 96% male and 4% female. So it's a real challenge in the poker world to increase the number of females who are interested in playing.
It definitely seemed very one-sided, and it was kind of funny. Elodie had pointed that out to me very quickly.
Yeah.
How few women were in the room. She said it was eerily spooky. Like,
right. It's
not the place a single woman would want to be walking by themselves.
It's not a place to be a single guy either, because you have very few. Your chances are very small.
Definitely not the dating app people have come to grow and love at the World Series of Poker. But their merch world was a little bit like going to a NASCAR race. It was a massive pop-up store in the lobby that was huge. You could walk in for free. If you're not playing, you can walk around. They have the tables barricaded up, but you can get really close. You can actually feel the sweat off the players like closest to the boundary. You can get very close.
Yeah, it's really a great experience. I think poker is a game that's super accessible, and you can have like the superstars of poker. They'll take pictures. You know, if they're playing near like one of those stanchions, you can watch them play the entire time. It's really it's a great experience, and I think they do it really well. World Series is a first-class event.
So what I thought was neat was they have the TV set up with like the main table where the really big guys play. The guys that tend to wind up at the final table are usually on, and then the set's pretty amazing. But it was on the same floor that you were playing on, maybe 30 yards from where your table was.
Right.
Simultaneously, they're just players upon players upon players playing. And you can walk up and see any of them happening. And people are super intense on what's going on, and hundreds of games going on simultaneously. And unlike TV, there's nobody like just talking about the percentages don't pop up, and you don't get to see what's under other people's hand. You don't have the commentator like helping you through. So it's very much not knowing what's going on anywhere. It really is like dead silence. Kind of like the difference between watching an NFL game on TV and being in the crowd. Like without the commentary, it's just like this is a whole different game without somebody explaining the percentage of odds to win and
knowing what each player's hole cards are. That's really
that would
helpful.
make it so much easier for you as a player too if you could watch that.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. I think my win rate would go up.
So this is an intense thing. So day one, the day we saw, you came out very well. You start with $50,000 in chips. You buy in for 10, but everybody starts with 50.
Yeah, the 10 grand just becomes chips. So everybody puts their money in. You get 50,000 in chips, and then it's all about the chips until one person has all of the chips at the end.
So end of day one, you more than double up, right?
Yeah, end of day one, I had about 115,000, which was a fantastic result.
Yeah, if we could do that in the fucking show business, that'd be
great. Be great, wouldn't it?
Okay, so that gets you an invitation to day two. Like, it's a cutoff thing, right? You had to do at least so well chip-wise to make the second day, right?
All you have to do to make day two is have chips. So
as long as you don't go all in and then lose it on the flop?
Your whole goal is not to get eliminated and lose all your chips. I made it into day two, and I don't really even know how many people made it, but let's say 30% of the field from day one to day two disappears. And then day two kind of had a roller coaster and played about 9.5 hours and then got busted out at the end, which was brutal.
But like right at the end, like you were half an hour from the end, right?
Half an hour from the end of the day. Finally got some great cards to work with. I had, for anybody who cares, like I had Ace King suited, which is a really strong hand. And there was a French pro on my right. He opened, I shoved. I had 22 big blinds. He called. He had jacks. So I'm 45, roughly like 45 to 47%. I'd have to look on suited Ace King. And just nothing came. So that was it. It was over.
Well, you got beat by a pro, and he did very well, right? Like he
finished in the top 100 somewhere. He was
so you
brutal.
lost to one of the best, and that had to feel at least like a nice consolation.
Yeah, it felt nice. Hopefully, I wish he would have won it because then it would be a great story. But he was French and seemed nice enough. So It was a tough spot to be next to a guy who's won like $2 million playing tournament poker. He was very good.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this. So when you buy your ticket, they tell you, and this is how I found you because you posted your ticket.
Yeah.
It tells you what room you're in, which I believe yours was Amazon.
Yeah, I was Amazon.
You were orange.
Yep, Amazon Orange. Great memory.
But there's a table number and a seat number.
Right.
So you can figure out what room they're in, and roughly each room has a different color. So you find the color, and then you just kind of scan that zone, which, once we figured out the room, it wasn't that hard. But are you stuck at that table for the day?
No, you're stuck at the table until they break the table. That just means like as people bust out, they have a system where they take the tables that are breaking up and they move all of the people off that table and start filling in the other tables. So both of my days, I wasn't in an area where they were breaking tables. It's kind of a win to be in the Amazon because usually that's where everybody ends up. So you get to play with those same people all day for all 10 hours.
So you get to start to learn their habits.
So you get to learn the habits. That's a real
some of the
advantage.
tells.
Yeah, and one advantage I had is on day one, I was just playing with a lot of bucket list guys, which means the players were in Las Vegas playing the World Series like for the first time, or they're not pros. They're not full-time players. And that was one of the reasons I did so well on day one, is I was able to take advantage of lesser players. On day two, one of the things you do is you check this source called Hendon Mob. So you find out what your table draws and who's at your table the night before, and then you can look everybody up and what their all-time earnings are and what their winnings are. You can just get an idea of how strong people are. So the guy on my right, the French pro guy, I think he was 1.7 million. And most of the people at my table were in six figures in terms of their poker earnings. I think 4 of them were at $500,000 or more. It's just a signal that they're like good players.
So that's bucket list for you? You're like, shit, that's so cool. For me, it'd be like kind of intimidating. Oh, great, they put me against all these big fucking shit.
Yeah. So, and then I think 2 of the guys at my table had made deep runs. The French pro had been in the top 200. He may have been 16th the year before. And then there was another guy at the table.
That's finishing deep in the money then, right?
Yeah, he probably did like $300,000+ on that one.
It's a good day's work.
Yeah, it's great. So he had gone deep, and there was a Russian guy that had gone in the top 100 the year before. So table full of really solid grinders who know what they're doing and have a strategy that has worked for them before, like in terms of going deep. So that just made it super challenging. Like then every hand you play becomes a battle versus being able to take things down with little resistance.
Okay, so like the top 9 finishers finish with $1 million or more, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you finish in the money if you finish in the top 500, is that right? Something like that?
I think it was 1182 or somewhere a little under 1200 all made the money, and you get 15 grand. So you're picking up $5,000 and getting your money back. And that's something the World Series changed a couple of years ago because most tournaments pay the top 10%. They widened that to pay the top, I guess it was maybe 15%. And the reason that they're doing that is because they want more of the bucket list guys and the average Joes to get their money back +5 so that they do it again. Because if you're a guy like me and you go out and you lose the 10 grand, your chances of coming back the next year are pretty small. But if you go out and pick up 5 grand and break even plus a little, then that's
because you cover your travel in your room.
Yeah, then it's like,
$5.
I could take that money and come back again. That's re-up. So I think that's one of the reasons they expanded the winning field, and it kind of flattened the payouts until the end. So you don't start making 100 grand until maybe the final 75 players. But it was a smart strategy move for the World Series to get more people to keep coming back. And that the field this year was the second largest field to ever play.
So in your head, are you replaying over and over and over again that hand that you went out on, or were your cards so strong that you played it right?
No, I feel great about how I played that hand. There are some mistakes that I made earlier in the day that I keep replaying in my head that I wish I would have done differently. Just think one of the things that I wish I had back is in an ultra marathon. Like if you think about running a marathon, it's 26.2 miles. Like the World Series of Poker is like 4 of those. So it's like an ultra marathon. And in an ultra marathon, like being solid, consistent, and patient is your friend. And there were probably 3 hands where I should have gone with the patience button instead of the aggressive button. And it cost me some chips each time. And had I just stayed patient, because day one, I just had such a great stack, I could have just stayed even through day 2 and taken 115 into day 3 and been in good shape. I just should have erred more on the side of patience and caution than what I did. So I wish I would have had those hands back.
Wasn't that part of it? Is that sitting at that table for so many hours, you're bound to get worn down.
That's part of it. And I think part of the patience strategy is just understanding who you're up against And at a table full of professional poker players, you just want to make sure that there are like 3 keys to being successful in tournament poker. Patience is like the first 5, and then it's followed by position, like where you are in relation to the button. Because if you are on the button, then you're the last person to act. And when you're the last person to act, you've got all the information in front of you on what everybody's strategy is and how they're valuing their hands. And then the last part's premium hands. If I had those 3 hands to do again, I would do them differently. Plus, then you've got to factor in who your opponent is and how aggressive they are. And I got into these 2 hands with this super aggressive guy. I knew he was super aggressive and just should have played it differently. When you play a super aggressive guy and patience is your friend, you only want to battle him with like a really solid hand or a premium hand. I tried to bluff him and it didn't work, and it just ended up getting my face bashed in on that hand. So it's just how it goes sometimes.
The first day, I gotta imagine there's a bunch of younger, newer players that just want to go all in and see if like that's gonna be their strategy to go in like almost every pot and see if they can how far that's gonna get them. Is there any of that?
There was none of that. Like the first day I played,
$10,000 is such a real buy-in.
Yeah, it's a real buy-in.
It buys off all the suckers.
You know, day one I'm with a bunch of bucket list dudes, and those dudes are out there either buying in or like winning their way in. And when you do that and you spend all that time and money to get out to Las Vegas, the last thing you want to do is get knocked out early or on day one. So most of those players play super, super conservatively, which is then how you can take, and how I was taking advantage of them all day is you knew they didn't want to put all their chips in the middle. So you just keep putting pressure on those guys because they're going to fold, because they don't want to get in the big pot. They don't want to lose a lot of chips. They just want to stay in. So when you understand, you know, I've got a guy from Boston playing in his first World Series ever. He's probably deep in his 50s. He's just hanging on. Like, he's not going to be aggressive. And if you come back and re-raise him or put the pressure on him, 90+% he's going to fold. So my strategy day one was fantastic, and it worked to perfection because I was able to take advantage of a combination of a lot of guys at the table with some value bluffing with hands that I was behind, but I was able to take advantage of the fact that they were scared to lose chips or scared to get knocked out. And I used that to my advantage. And then I was able to, when I hit hands, really able to take advantage of maximizing, like extracting chips from somebody else.
The level of it being a dream for most people, like going to fantasy baseball camp or something, like playing with the pros has got to be an interesting thing. And from what I picked up while I was there, a lot of the bigger players don't even play in the tournament because there's so much money to be won in the side games.
Yeah. With the main event, it just depends. Like one guy, Patrick Antonius, sat next to one of my buddies out there on day 3. And he was talking about how tired he was because he was up at the Bellagio playing cash all night. And he was playing 4-8, which means the small blind was $4,000, the big blind was $8,000, and you had to come to the table with at least $1 million in your stack. So that's like a different level. Like if you're buying into the World Series for 10 grand, that's a lot of money for most people. But if you're an elite poker pro who's got a bankroll and you're playing with $1 million in front of you, what does the 10 grand really mean? So it changes everything. But a lot of those guys will play the main event just because it's the most prestigious poker tournament in the world every year. They'll waste, in quotations, 3 or 4 days going for it, because if you can make a deep run and get to the final table, then it really means something for your career.
The guys that have that kind of money to play, they're staked, right? Like a horse would have different owners or whatever. There's investors that back them, right? In a lot of cases.
I don't have the inside information on who's staked and who's not.
But that's a thing, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a big thing is to be staked.
That's a normal practice that a lot of players have investors, right?
Yeah, just to take out the variance. So if you're a great player and you're playing cash and you're winning $1 million one day and you're losing $1 million the next, that's a pretty big roller coaster. So you want to get somebody behind you to kind of even it out, so you're not really thinking about the money and thinking about what you're winning and losing, because it doesn't impact you as much because somebody else is taking the variance and taking the loss. I think of like the best players, probably 85% of them are staked or backed in some way. Maybe in like smaller tournaments, they just take all their own action. But if you're playing the $1 million one drop, which is the World Series poker tournament event where you're putting $1 million down to play, probably 27 guys did it. There were some businessmen who probably bought in for the $1 million. But of the poker players, maybe 1 or 2 took all their own action, and probably none. So, yeah, but in a general, like, everyday poker life, maybe 15% of guys aren't staked who are playing at, like, super elite levels. So if
you could finish in the top 50 or something, you could go to maybe Ashley and say, hey, you want to use some of that Live Nation money to stake in the bigger games.
We had that conversation, and he said, I don't believe in you, so.
Thanks, boss.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. We never had the conversation, but
you knew what the answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't want. I had some people back me in 2012 when I went out there, and I don't think I'm ever doing that again because I didn't cash, and I just felt so. Bad. I still feel guilty like 6 years later. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm risking anybody else's money to do something that I really love. I'm just gonna back myself.
Dude, we honestly have to have you back on the podcast to talk about your industry side of the business, but this is such a fascinating story, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about it.
You got it, Dan. Anything for you?
Promoter 101, poker lessons from the great Ted Heinig. Team Ted.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Man, I love this segment. Handsome Ted Heinig making it to the World Series and faring very well. I'm Team Ted all the way, and I'm stoked. The whole concept of the World Series, the experience just sounds so amazing.
I am Barbara Hubbard from New Mexico and around the nation wherever I can produce a concert that will sell a ticket. We're in Promoter 101.
Celebrating birthdays this week from August 3rd to August 9th, 2018.
Hey, Friday the 3rd, Tony Conway, Martin Atkins, David Allen, and Allison Carter.
Saturday, August 4th, APA's Adam Badowski and ICM's Scott Pang. Two solid dudes.
Sunday, Lane Arnold, John Pennell, and Tom Ewald.
Monday, Live Nation's Brian Traeger and Paradigm's Joshua Knight.
Tuesday, 8/7, Dave Wiles.
Wednesday, 8/8, MSG's Randy Fibiger, Ollie Jennings, Harry Tyler, Ian Moore.
Thursday, Matt Girding, Kathy Buckle, and Katie Borgen.
Happy birthday to all of you from all of us at Promoter 101.
Hey, this is Bobby Reynolds with AEG Presents in Las Vegas. I'm here with Dan on Promoter 101.
Now a little legal advice from AEG Presents Senior Counsel Jason Bernstein that everyone should know. Keep in mind, this advice is free, but I'm sure as an attorney, Jason will find a way to invoice everybody. And remember, he is billing by the hour, guys.
Man, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to be on.
It's great to have that free legal advice whenever we can get it. I know our listeners love it. Before we jump into that, man, I got to thank you so much. We now have our Twitter account, Promoter 101, thanks to you completely. Thank you, man.
I was happy to do it, and you saw the back and forth. It was kind of a fluke, but it was a cool thing to do, and sometimes I try stuff just to see what'll happen, and that one worked out really well.
It's kind of funny because he reached out afterwards that he was having some separation anxiety. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think the guy was in Malaysia or someplace, Southeast Asia area, and didn't want to do it, and then all of a sudden one day he said, hey, I changed my mind. Are you still interested? So I figured I'd jump on it and got it done really quickly.
We're thrilled to have it, and it means the world. It was such generosity. Thank you so much, Jason.
Totally happy to help. I love what you guys are doing, and I thought it was a cool way to give a tip of the hat to you.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. So you're going to give some free legal advice in a segment we call 3 Tips, the mind of the legal world for entertainment industry, of things to watch for, right?
Hopefully. I'm not anyone's lawyer other than the people that hire me, but hopefully I can help everyone out and make the world a better place for all of us.
Right. Technically, aren't you AEG's lawyer?
Technically, yeah. Like I said, they're the ones who hire me.
Okay, well, then you're somebody's lawyer.
There you go. Yeah, I get to handle a bunch of stuff. I'm taking care of Louis Messina's stuff over at Messina Touring. I'm helping out Madison House and Concerts West and Golden Voice, so it's always an interesting day. Never the same thing twice.
So if you want to have the tone of your client's voice when it's Louis, is it like screaming in caps just to demonstrate exactly how he's speaking?
You know, he screams louder than anyone else in the business.
And maybe does his words have like a bottle of Jack Daniels in one hand somehow?
Probably in both. But no, I've been really lucky. I got to work for Louis Messina, you know, obviously with Meglin and all of his team. And when I was in high school and college, I was Bill Silva's local grunt. So I've been really fortunate to see some of the best guys in the world and how they handle things. And it's definitely not yelling and screaming. And it's a lot more simplifying things and keeping it clean so everyone understands what's going on.
Man, talk about the spectrums of personalities. It's like Bill Silva being the most mellow and well-communicated man in the industry. So Louis Messina being possibly the biggest promoter in the world at this moment, but maybe not so mellow.
I've always found Louis to be real mellow. I've never seen him get upset with anyone. It's usually come on the bus. Louis likes to hang, shoot the breeze. He gets the business done, but I've never seen him angry or upset unless he had to be on a phone call for like more than 15 minutes.
Let's jump into it, man. What is the first tip you've got for our listeners today that they should watch out for in the legal world?
I would always say try to write in plain English and don't overcomplicate things. I always think if you don't know what something means, ask and put it in plain English. I operate with what I call the Mack truck theory of law. And if the two people that cut the deal aren't around for whatever reason, maybe they're having a baby or someone got hit by a truck or whatever it is, I want someone to be able to pick up the contract, read it, and understand what's going on. You know, I've been able to convert things like 2 or 3 pages of indemnity language down to 3 or 4 lines of type just by saying it's a really simple concept. You're responsible for your stuff. I'm responsible for mine. Things like ticketing, especially when people talk about Lyft and packaging and VIP programs, just line out who's responsible for what and keep it simple. Don't try to get overly fancy because it just causes confusion, which is never good.
All right, so rule 1 is keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. Number 2 ties into that, which is ask questions. And if you don't understand what something means, go ahead and ask. I think the secret is try not to ask the same question twice on different occasions. But if you're reading a contract or talking through a concept and you don't understand it, ask a few questions. You'll come away understanding what it means. And probably more importantly, you'll know what's expected of you and can explain it to your team. Number 3 is to remember that the contract has to work for both sides. One of the things I probably tell people the most frequently is the contract can't just work for me and it can't just work for you. It's got to work for both of us. And sometimes we got to work through things and reach agreement. It can be tricky because if there's a small venue and, you know, we're running the place for $1,000, they're probably not going to want to take on a lot of risk. If we're going into a stadium and they're making huge amounts of money, I can get them to be a little more in line with where I want. And, you know, it just all goes back and forth. Sometimes you can't reach agreement. When I was in college, we had the gentleman who ran our local 2,500 seat theater. He made real clear that unless he was a fan of whatever act we happened to be booking, every time we did a show was just one less night he could be at home with his wife and kids. And he was never cooperative. And it actually got to the point we said, we can't find something that works. And we started doing shows off campus. One of the things I think that helps to get the contract to work for both sides, instead of sending red lines back and forth, include some comments and explain why you're pulling something out. I hate when people take something out, the other side puts it in, then it comes back out, and it's just a bunch of back and forth.
Hey, but you guys get paid on the hour a lot of times, so I see why you do that shit.
Some of them do. I don't. I'm in-house. I talk with my friends at Live Nation. Same thing. We got a lot of volume, plenty to do. So we just want to hit the middle, get the deal done, and move on. And, you know, a lot of times trading emails doesn't work. You guys have mentioned there's this really cool device that most people still have on their desk or in their back pocket. Pick up the phone, talk to people, explain the concerns, and usually you can work out things and say, oh, I didn't realize what you're looking at. And people read things different ways, and we get them resolved.
Okay, so communication helps speed across the process.
Yeah, apparently communicating is a good thing.
In the past, we've had Dave Ratner on the podcast who's given us the term offer and acceptance, which is, I thought, a really good educational piece for our listeners that the deal has changed. You're not locked into it until both parties agree on the same terms. Do you have a cool term like that that's like really helpful to know on your daily life?
Not specifically. Like I said, I think the Mack truck theory of law is similar to what he said. You got to have a deal that works for both sides, and other people have to be able to read it and know what that deal is.
Why is it always a Mack truck? Don't you think a Ford or Chevy truck could do a pretty good job on you?
You know, it could be just one of those little scooters that's going around town. I went to lunch earlier this week and almost got knocked over by some kid who was just flying by. No helmet and riding on the sidewalk. So, yeah, it could be something other than a Mack truck.
So in-house counsel, you're focused on Louis stuff and you said also Madison House stuff, so the Mike Luba type world. What kind of stuff is your day-to-day practice? Is it mostly contracts and just trying to get the language down?
It's a little bit of everything. It's a lot of contracts. Sometimes it's just weird situations that pop up. You know, for Coachella, I'm involved with, we don't really talk about what I do there because it's like Fight Club. But I take care of some of their issues. You know, when their sponsors might have an issue, we once had a festival that someone wanted to let the security company go. And I said, yeah, the contract will probably let you do that, but what are we going to do for tomorrow? And everyone said, okay, good point. And so sometimes it's just being the adult in the room and having a practical approach and helping people work things out.
Cool. Let's go back to you not being allowed to talk about Coachella. What's that about?
I'm just joking. There was an article recently, and we all said it was kind of funny because they didn't talk to anyone that was involved in the show.
Satire, if you will.
Yeah.
Awesome, because I find Paul Tillett to be a very open book normally.
He is very open, and I love working with those guys. I think everyone you've had on, everyone will tell you, it is the most dedicated group of people I've ever met in the business. I've been doing this for about 30 years, and just every single person in that office will probably jump in front of the Mack truck to help one another. We all can trust each other blindly to do the lifting and take care of whatever needs to be done. It's awesome.
Now, I've noticed in my career, my need for lawyers usually comes down to preparation. It's writing pieces of paper that we never actually need, but with professionals that you trust that the deal has been hammered out so well in advance, we never need to go back and fight over it because we fought in the first place.
One of my jobs was as John Meglin's assistant. This was long before law school. But what he said is, you go through the contract to figure out who's responsible for what, and then you should be able to put it up on the shelf. If there's a question or you're not sure, you can look at it to reference. But if you're pulling it out in a lawsuit, hopefully people have picked up the phone and worked things out. But if you do have something, you want the contract to be right. So, I'm fortunate with the guys that I work with, written a ton of really great contracts, but everything went well, so no one will ever know.
And that's the hope, right? That you never need to actually use it. It's just a whole lot of prevention and hope that you never go there, because lawsuits themselves are the most uncost-effective way of resolving any conflict. And it's also usually comes out to, if you make it to the courtroom, it has to do with somebody either stalling and being very crooked or massive ego on at least one side, as far as what I've seen.
I won't disagree with that. I mean, occasionally you got to do what you got to do, but yeah, hopefully you don't get there. But if you do, you want to make sure that everything's clear and that people understand what it is. And if you've done that, you should be able to resolve it before you ever get there. It's usually the ambiguities and things that aren't clear that requires you to have someone else help figure it out. Otherwise, if you've done your job and everyone's honoring the spirit of the deal, it's very rare that you should end up having to go all the way to court.
All right, and let's talk about the spirit of the deal. What a great term, and I love it. It's a Bill Silva phrase, I believe, that goes way back. But it's all about, regardless of what the paper says, you and me had a vibe and we both knew what that was, and that's what we're trying to honor.
Always.
Long-term business in this industry is based on repeat business.
Definitely.
So suing someone definitely doesn't help repeat business. I know it happens occasionally that somebody winds up in court and then they wind up back in business together, but very unrealistic in the real world that happens these days. Usually you sue somebody, you're done with them.
Usually. I was vending T-shirts for Bill, and we had a high and a low on what the vendors would get paid on a given night. The deal was reasonable in that in 3-year span, there was one time where I got paid the minimum because it just wasn't selling. And there was one night where we did blockbuster business, huge amounts, and I hit the maximum. Every other time it was somewhere in the middle. And that's kind of how things should work. It was a reasonable deal. That was the concept. When I took a hit, he covered it. When, things did great, there was an offset. And I think that's the concept. Be reasonable and don't always look at what the other guy's got. Be aware of what's on the table. But if you're happy with what you got and you're not being ripped off, that's the concept. But don't be letting one side get slammed while the other one's doing fantastic and not recognize the risks and the rewards. People should work together.
Okay, I want to point out the fascinating shit that you've talked about in the last couple seconds. Sold T-shirts for Bill Silva, do Louis Messina's contracts, came up as Jock Mendlin's assistant. Obviously, at some point, you went to law school, and now in-house counsel at AEG. That is quite a career you have wrapped your hands around, my friend.
I was kind of like the original Nike cross trainer, I guess. I think anyone that's been on your podcast who's done well and been around for a while usually has done a few different things. I was around at the time that, different companies were getting bought up by SFX, and the deals were getting more complicated. We had really smart attorneys, but they couldn't quite understand the deal. I understood the deals we were putting together, but I didn't know how to word them. And I thought if I could find a way to bridge that gap, that would probably be a good thing. So I went to law school, I got out and I went, I'm here. And they said, yeah, you need to go learn how to be a lawyer. So even with the connections, I had to go do some other stuff for a while, came back. And since then, it's been wonderful. I'm coming up on 10 years, and no 2 days are the same, and it's actually really a lot of fun.
You saw the vision, like, hey, the lawyers don't get the industry. I get the industry, and I'm young enough to go to school for this, so I could be the lawyer that truly specializes in live music industry business law.
I didn't actually go to law school till I was in my early 30s. So, I wasn't the kid right out of college doing it. I worked in the business for probably 10 years before I went to law school. Then I did it, came back.
Are you involved with the mergers and acquisition deals that AEG does?
Very little. Someone described me as a concert promoter that happens to have a law degree in my back pocket. I don't think that's accurate, but I also didn't have the corporate background of the high-profile mergers and acquisitions. We've got people here that are brilliant at that, and they don't necessarily want to deal with the agents and manager side of the world. I don't want to deal with the finance end from that perspective. So it's a really good balance.
Is there a job that you guys have over there where you wouldn't have to deal with the agents, the managers, or the finance? Because that sounds like a great thing.
Not that I'm aware of. I guess the caterer?
Or possibly the performer.
Yeah, even they have to deal with it.
Jason, I can't thank you enough, not only for being on the podcast, but for getting us our Twitter handle. Thank you so much.
Happy to help and keep on doing the great work. It's really fun to listen.
Jason is wicked smart.
Yeah, that was some solid legal advice from Jason. And Steiny, please remember to retain all your notes for the inevitable deposition.
This is John Schultz. I'm Windish.
Charlie from Crescent Ballroom.
Craig Newman.
Dave Brooks. Dave Ratner.
Dawn Holiday.
Ted Bicknell.
Alex.
Imong Shah. Kelly Lefko.
Gerald B. Henley.
Harlan Fry here.
Jack Ross.
Jason Miller.
Jeffrey Fox. Joe Escalante.
Blair LeBlanc.
Martin Atkins.
Neil Dixon. Nick Farkas.
Paula Palazzo.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101!
Feel free to write us at steiny@promoter101.net.
Hey, the quote of the week comes to us from Bono. He's in a little band called U2. 1978 wasn't a really exciting time for U2. We discovered F sharp minor. We only had 3 chords up till then.
That's a solid one. Did you see that when U2 was rehearsing at the BOK Center this year in Tulsa, they literally renamed the streets around the arena No Name? Get it?
Where the streets have no name.
And we'll be back next week with a brand new Promoter 101 with Martin Hopewell, APA's Noel Largesse, and a war story from Aaron Rosen.
Special thanks to Dave Brooks for filling in for W. Luke Pierce, who's off on the green somewhere. And we'll see you next week. Wishing you sold out shows. Cheers.
Have a good one, guys.
Hey, it's Gary Witt from the Pabst Theater Group on Promoter 101.
Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba.